All right. Well, first, I want to thank you for doing this. I'm super excited to
Yeah,
start
yeah.
bringing this and collaborating with people. I think it's really important for me to start talking or start sharing other stories than my own. I can only talk
Yeah.
about
Oh
my
man.
same story so many times. So
Well, I mean, yeah, everything you've done has been awesome and inspiring to me, and kind of sets the tone for what I want to do, and just the positivity behind TS, and just looking at it through that lens has been a great starting point for me. So,
yeah,
we talked very early on.
yes,
That was a good tone setter for the rest of the podcast, of just kind of having that sense of strength and command and pride, and not being embarrassed about it, which I was. So
yeah.
yeah, I'm really appreciative.
Oh, well, thank you. I was super pumped when you reached out to me. I was really excited. I really love obviously everything that you're doing too. You're bringing so much awareness and your podcast seems to be doing really well. So it's very exciting for the Tourette syndrome community, at least for me in general.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, no, I'm really happy with it.
good.
Season 5 is going to be. I'm working on that right now, and it's going to be a lot more like wide open.
Okay.
But otherwise, I'm going to be very candid about sort of stuff that's been going on since the end
Yeah.
of season 4, and sort of pursuing psychiatric treatment, which has been amazing, and
Yeah.
trying to get to know myself better from that angle. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's
I
been
think
really.
that's really powerful. It's a big movement kind of too, I think that's happening right now. So I would just want to start, obviously, your name is Ben. You have the Tourette podcast that I'm sure most people watching are probably familiar with, or at least I hope they are. How old are you right now?
I'll be turning 40 in just a few months.
What age and like when did you start noticing like your body and everything doing something different, I guess, or your family start noticing it?
So it goes back with me as far as I can remember, but
Mm.
according to my parents, it started showing up when I was maybe 4 or 5,
Oh,
where I would
okay.
just start doing things with my eyebrows and kind of widening my eyes, doing weird
Yeah.
things with my mouth, kind of like doing some head jerking and things like that, and
Hmm.
and and so they took me to a series of different doctors. Again, I was born in 1980, so
Hmm.
this wasn't the time where people, really anybody, knew what Tourette syndrome was,
Right.
in any sort of walking around sense.
Right.
So they wanted to make sure that I wasn't having seizures. They wanted to make
Yeah.
sure that it was just a long list to check off, and it was a long road to get to a Tourette syndrome diagnosis, just because of the access to the information.
Right.
It happened to be a newspaper column that my mom read about it, that was like, oh, maybe this is what he has. Then we went
Oh
to a
wow.
neurologist. I ended up getting diagnosed.
Wow. That's really interesting. My mom actually was watching not a news program. I think she was watching like a talk show, and they had kids with
Hmm.
Tourette syndrome on it, and that's what got my mom to start thinking about maybe that's what she has as well. So that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember when I was little too, young. I was watching some talk shows when Tourette syndrome was becoming more of a social curiosity, and
Mhm.
people were, like, "What is this?" There was a Geraldo episode. I think there was a Sally Jesse Raphael episode or something. And I remember seeing, so the panel of people with Tourette were people I had met at Tourette syndrome conferences.
Oh, wow,
So it was
okay.
kind of neat. It was neat to see them up there, but the casting of it was kind of not inspiring, I guess, to
Yeah.
me, in terms of how the questions were framed and portrayed. Everybody in the panel did an amazing job,
Yeah.
but it seemed more of like, let's kind of put these people up there and look at them, that sort of
Mhm.
thing. It didn't really seem to be us. And of course, what happened to follow was, uh, the way the media kind of picked it up from there, pop culture kind of picked it up from
Yeah.
there. Wasn't the most glamorous or pride inducing thing, which is why
Right.
people with TS sometimes stay in the closet about it,
Yeah.
which is what I chose to do.
Yeah. My mom, after I was diagnosed, my mom actually wouldn't let me watch a lot of things she would try to watch specials and stuff that she would see come up, but she wouldn't let me watch it with her until she watched it first because of that like portrayal, and she was never sure how it was going to be portrayed, and she didn't want me
Hmm.
sitting there watching and listening to something telling me over and over again like what I wasn't going to be able to do or how awful my life was going to be. And I
Yeah,
really think
yeah,
that was huge for me.
yeah. It can be uncomfortable, kind of probing this, and
Yeah.
I get a lot of parents who write in about that. Should I go to there's a Tourette syndrome conference coming up, or there's a meetup in my area. should I go? I'm worried it's going to kind of inflame or exacerbate the issue with my kid. And I don't know the specifics of their individual issues, so I can't really
Right.
answer for them. But what I can say is the camaraderie that you end up getting, especially when you just talk with people who almost like psychically know
Yeah.
where you're coming from, is a really empowering thing and makes you feel way less isolated, way less
Mhm.
alone. And I think that can be a life changing thing. And I think it can help parents kind of have perspective too on kind of how common it is.
Right.
Like it's not one in a million people. It's that
Right.
there's a lot of people with Tourette syndrome,
Right.
diagnosed or undiagnosed, and
Yeah.
exposure to that and having that community, I've never really heard much of a bad story about it, unless it's a situation where, and this only makes sense to people who have Tourette, but it's the saying that Tourette is contagious among people who already have it,
Right.
to
Yeah.
where
Like feed off of it.
we play off each other's ticks.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny because this is only the second video interview I've done with another Touretter,
Hmm.
and the first was with Wendy from Survivor,
Oh,
and
okay.
she was so fun to talk to. But looking at her and watching her tick, I picked up one of her ticks, and I still have a
Yeah.
variation on it where I kind of tap my head 3 times.
Yeah.
Um, she has a sign of the cross tick, and
Okay.
so we were kind of feeding off each other's ticks as we were
Hmm.
going, and uh, and I think that's one of the worries that kind of thing is going to kind of take over if you're in a situation where you're hanging out with other Touretters.
Right.
But I've never heard a bad story.
Right. Yeah. And
Um,
it does it. Like I can pick up on them, and my tips will. I'm not around people with Tourette syndrome often. Like it's just not a thing that I'm around. Besides when I do like my host my events and people come with Tourette syndrome, but and it increases them during that time and even after for a little bit. But it's never to the point where like I wish I wouldn't have gone. Like if I get a
exactly.
new slew of ticks and that's just what happens, it's just so nice. Like it's even just so nice. I think just hearing like, yeah, me too. Like I don't hear that a
Yeah,
lot growing up with Tourette syndrome.
absolutely. There are so many unexpected takeaways that you get from that.
Yeah.
Meeting with somebody that where you don't have to feel nervous about the context because it's already understood, and
Right. You don't have to
that
explain
is so
yourself.
powerful. And that's the kind of thing with TS overall is the ticking is it's not an issue, unless it causes you pain.
Right.
It's something that you can take as a companion, and is something that really nobody should have a problem with because it doesn't affect anybody's lives.
Right.
It's just it affects me, and if
Right.
I want to take medication for my ticks, I want to do that for me, but and not for everybody else.
Right.
But it's the kind of thing where if society was more casual about it and more just kind of like, oh, he's got TS, I know what that is,
Right.
versus he's got TS, look at him and laugh.
Right.
Society was more relaxed about that kind of thing. I think it would make everything else so much easier because, as we always say, it's more than just ticks. It's
Right.
depression, anxiety, OCD, sleep
Mhm.
issues, all kinds of things that in my life are more serious than
Right.
the ticking.
Yeah, yeah, I think I struggle more with, some of my OCD and anxiety things. I think for a long time, I didn't realize some of the way my body was reacting and some of the things that I was feeling was anxiety for a really long time. I just thought, like well, one, I thought I had I mean, I do kind of have a temper problem, but I thought that was, like, the majority of it, but as I'm
Hmm.
learning even more about it now, even at 30 years old, like, I realize, like, some of that is my anxiety
Hmm.
flaring, and
Yeah,
I just most of the time, it's like anxiety attacks, and for so long, I didn't even realize that's what was going on, which is crazy.
yeah. Experiencing panic attacks and just anxiety attacks and moments where that's really intense is, I mean, yeah, it's intense.
Mhm.
It is clearly the more serious issue, especially with me. And I'll be candid about this. After season 4 of the podcast ended, I was really dealing with depression and picked up a new diagnosis of major depressive disorder and various other anxiety related things. So I checked myself into an inpatient facility, which is something that I think would be embarrassing for people to talk about. Oh, you went to a mental institution,
Right,
or however the outside world views it. I did it voluntarily because I
right.
wanted to figure out and see if I could, kind of plot a new course for myself.
Yeah, I think
And
that's the stronger step to take is making it for yourself. Like, and that's again, that's the stigma around like mental institutions. Like, it needs to be referred to differently.
yeah, and it's initially, every time a new person would show up in the inpatient facility, so we kind of commingled, we all talked. I talked about my TS and about the podcast and things like that. Every time a new person showed up, you could tell they were kind of starting from the same kind of coding of
Yeah.
like, oh God, like, what am I doing here? Like, am I going to come out worse? Is this going to
Yeah.
be, by the end, like it was a similar situation, even though I was the only person there with TS, everybody knew where I was coming from
Right.
because of the context of the situation, the
Yeah.
comorbidities that we shared. And everybody was cool and empathetic. And I got to say, the doctors were great, but being able to interact with other inpatients there and just hang out and talk
Yeah.
about what's going on with us, I would say maybe doctors 49%, inpatients 51% in terms
Oh,
of
wow.
what was helping me really be
Yeah.
successful. And I think they would admit that too. I think the
Right.
whole facility would admit that it's important to socialize with people who know where you're coming from, and you can help each other kind of get through it. And it's almost like you can cheerlead each other back into good mental health.
Yeah.
And the podcast has been really essential to me in that way too. It's kind of free therapy for me
Yeah.
in a way. But the inpatient thing was fantastic. I followed it up with an outpatient series as well, where I would go to group therapy sessions and
Okay.
got a really good outlook on myself in terms of
Good.
what I need to do
Right.
to manage this stuff, the coping skills, the grounding skills. I did yoga for the first time,
Okay.
which I always thought was a non-starter because of my tics, because, like the way my head would jerk or the way like my back would tense up, or things I always thought would be a non-starter for something like yoga, where you need breathing and relaxation. I have breathing tics as well that get in my way.
I know what you mean on those ones. Yeah, I hate my breathing tics.
But it was great. Like, I did it, and I don't know if it was the yoga instructor's voice or what, but like I would definitely go to a place where nothing was happening. Like, I was cured for a minute, and I'm using cured in quotes, but I felt fine. And afterward, I didn't feel quite as anxious. Anxiety will lead to the ticking and so on. So I found ways to kind of manage these things on, the iceberg graphic of, motor tics and vocal tics are the tip of the iceberg. And then below that, what people don't see is the anxiety and OCD and all that stuff that is often worse.
Right.
So when those things, kind of flare up, that's when I'm going to be ticking more. If I manage this other stuff, then I might have a better outlook. And,
no, that's
so
great.
I picked up new ways to do it.
Good. But that leads kind of into my other question that I had for you. I know you said obviously you took a yoga class and you found other treatments and everything. Especially now, because I know you're more open about your Tourette's now than you were when you were younger. What ways have you found to like help you when it gets really bad? Like what do you turn to, or is there anything that you turn to?
Really, talking and being kind of open and honest about what I'm immediately experiencing has been, again, what was another thing in my past life where I was kind of closeted about all this, that I thought maybe that was a non-starter, that, no one knows where I'm coming from. It's difficult to explain. It's a burden for people to try to understand it, that kind of thing.
Right.
And just accepting that it's not, and that people in your life, hopefully you have people in your life who do sincerely want to help you.
Yes.
Really lean into that when you need to. My friends and family have been amazing, just so positive and cool and supportive, and listening to me talk about the things I'm trying to get some command on.
Yeah.
And then there are these sort of immediate sort of things when I feel panic. So it's winter. When I feel panic setting on, and I can tell my symptoms too. My palms kind of feel a little bit different, a little bit tingly. Sometimes my teeth will start to chatter a little bit. If I go into a full blown attack, then my hands and lips go numb. I can't talk, and my teeth are chattering, and I'm just like streaming tears. Recognizing my symptoms and then doing something to kind of get a physiological response out of myself, holding something really cold or a handful of ice, or I haven't done this one yet, but I got one in the can ready to go for when it's time, is taking like a frozen orange or a frozen lime or something like that.
Okay.
And putting it up to your mouth and kind of just getting a physiological response. Sometimes I'll go stand out in the cold.
Yeah, I guess that does
or
make sense. Yeah, like
yeah,
splashing cold water on your face, that kind of stuff.
that is a good one. That is a
Yeah,
good one. It just kind of resets you for a second. It doesn't
yeah,
necessarily bail you out. It's not a
right,
cure,
right.
but it will at least give you a little bit more runway to manage things.
Yeah,
And then medications that I've been on have helped.
yeah,
And
good.
yeah, and I know we all have horror stories about medications,
Hmm.
and it's difficult to go through because you got to wait a while to see if it's actually working, and
Right.
it can be a long, frustrating process. But
Yes.
where I am with that process, I think I've found a combination of things that are helping me out, and
Good.
and I guess without saying them to not run the risk of endorsing them because they may not be the right thing for other people.
Right. And that's
I
what I always tell people too. People ask me about medication all the time, and I'm like, I've only chosen to be on it twice.
right,
And I've only had two different kinds. And the other one gave me more panic attacks and panic attacks I've never felt before. And so I got off of that one because I did not obviously enjoy that. But
yeah,
I know what worked for me. It's not going to work for everybody. And I always try to make that known. Like, I'm not a doctor. Like, I can only tell you what works for me. I can't tell you if
hmm,
it's going to work for you.
exactly, exactly. I can only talk about my experience because
Right.
I'm still learning about all this stuff.
Yeah.
Because I was closeted about it until what, like 3 years ago,
Yeah.
and I so I'm not a Tourette syndrome expert. It's one of these know thyself type things,
Right.
and learn more about the world by talking with other people who share your experiences.
Right.
But in season 5, I'm going to try to crack into. We've done some science stuff on the podcast, but crack into
Okay.
that a little bit more
Yeah.
with the doctors and researchers, and kind of answering questions that I have. That if
Yeah.
someone says, okay, so what's the brain doing when I
Yeah.
don't know. I know what I'm doing. I know
Right.
it affects on me, but I'm trying to learn more about it from kind of a clinical and really appreciate the work that is going into the research
Yeah.
side of it and the provider side of it from those who really get it. Because I know that's
Yeah.
a point of frustration for a lot of people too, is finding doctors who kind of know what they're talking about to start
Right.
with TS.
Yeah. That's really difficult. That's actually something I want to look more into as well, as like more of that clinical side of it. I want to dig into more of like the research that's happening and everything else. So I have more, I don't know, medical, I guess,
Hmm.
terminology if people ask about it. Because again, like you said too, like I only know how it's been for me
Right,
and the few
right.
people, the very small handful that I've been around that have
Yeah, yeah. But one thing I've been learning is that the doctors who do get it are amazing, and a lot of them, I won't say a lot of them, but some of the ones I've met, uh, and researchers
it.
have a direct connection to TS, whether it's in their family or they have it themselves,
Yeah.
and they there is a sincerity behind what they're
Mhm.
doing, and that you'll see on Twitter all day. There's criticism like, my doctor doesn't know anything, or my therapist doesn't
Right.
understand it, or uh, but there are those who do,
Yes,
and
there are.
it, and so this makes me I guess encouraged when it comes to things like telehealth and telemedicine, and
Mhm.
you can connect with a doctor who is not in your area. You don't have to take a flight to see. You can
Right.
just connect with them, on a laptop or something,
Yeah.
and start the conversation that way, because you may live in a very small town or even a big city who doesn't where the access is limited.
Right.
um, you may live in a rural area where going into a big city might be a trigger for you and kind of
Yeah.
set things off, your anxiety with your tics and all that. And so I, I'm encouraged by the researchers and doctors' interest in things like telehealth to see how well this might actually work as a starting point
Yeah.
uh, for people who otherwise don't have very many options.
Right. And I think it's huge because I know I have one neurologist in my area, and I could go up to the Cleveland area where I think there are a few more,
Hmm.
which isn't that far from me. We go there for less reasons, but I know like the medical field, like it's in my area, it does feel kind of limited, but maybe just because I haven't gone outside of the one doctor I've had my whole life. So
Right,
I haven't really done like my research on seeing another doctor, but because I have a mild case, I don't go back to my doctor very often either. Like it's
right.
been a couple years since I've went to see her because I didn't feel it necessary and I didn't want to pay a bill if I didn't have to. So
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's expensive. It can be.
yeah, and because I have a very long list of medical history, especially in the recent years, and so like I know the struggle of finding that right doctor that actually cares about what's happening. Not even with Tourette related, but other things as well. Because I have a lot of other things that people don't know a lot about, and it can
Mhm.
just be so frustrating finding the right doctor. And that's the
Right.
hardest part. For me, that's the hardest part to like not quit at is finding the doctor that gets it. It just
That's
frustrates.
true. Yeah, yeah. It's and especially when it comes to therapy and things like that, kind of finding a connection.
Yeah.
That's really important too, to have a personal connection with the an appreciation, I guess, with the doctor or therapist you're trying to see.
Hmm.
Because you want to strike the right tone. You don't want
Yeah.
to have extra work kind of figuring out the therapist and trying to appeal to
Right.
therapist or doctor or and we're talking, I guess, from a continuing care angle,
Hmm.
but but yeah, having access to somebody you really click with
Right.
is important. But by the same token, that's why it's also important for us to talk to each other about these things too, so we
Right.
can kind of raise the issue amongst
Hmm.
each other and feel good talking about it ourselves. And
Yeah. One of my other questions, not necessarily about doctors or anything, if you feel comfortable sharing, like, what are some of your like most dominant tics that you have like currently?
so you probably heard my vocal tick.
Hmm.
Uh, this is actually the oldest tick that I remember having. It went away for a
Okay.
long time and then it came back. This weird sort of like two syllable sound that I
Yeah.
make with my throat. I have an ear popping tick in my left ear
Oh,
that I probably
sounds
pop
painful.
my ear maybe like 1,000 times a day.
Wow.
Uh, I went to an audiologist because I was worried I was doing myself hearing damage,
Yeah.
and the tests were fine.
Oh, well, that's good.
Um, and then somebody wrote into the podcast who has like free diving and scuba diving experience
Hmm.
and snorkeling experience, and apparently being able to clear your ear like that is clearing your eustachian tubes, and it's a skill that divers
Oh,
work toward. So apparently, this is I already have a head start because of my TS
yeah.
on ear clearing ability. I have to practice it in my right, but that's a pretty dominant one. I like I said, I talked with Wendy from Survivor, and I got her. She had a sign of the cross tick, and I kind of
Yeah.
picked up this thing where I tap my forehead, have a
Hmm.
variation on that. There's some other, I guess, less visible ticks to where. So I have the breathing ticks, and they come
Hmm.
out at very bad times. Like if I'm
Yes.
trying to exercise or
Hmm.
jog or something like that,
Yep.
it'll really interfere with me, which is unfortunate because I have asthma. So I have to bring my
Okay.
inhaler with me because
Yeah.
I'll labor my own breathing.
Right.
Uh, Muscle tensing, things that, you know, happen, 1,000 times throughout the day, but are way less visible, I guess.
Yeah.
But do have an impact because they do kind of cause, lower back pain
Hmm.
and things like that. I got some neck pain from some like head jerking ticks that I have.
Yeah.
Um, but the vocal tick is the most dominant, I would
Yeah.
say. But since coming out about having TS, it's really kind of eased, I think, a lot of my ticks overall because my
Good.
coworkers
Yeah.
get it and they
Yep.
understand it. And I sit in this tight office with two other amazing people, Jack and Ashley, who um, they're not bothered by it at all. And so
Yeah.
I'm just kind of ticking away, doing my
Mhm.
work in a much in a way where the pressure of that is removed, the awkwardness of
Yep.
that is removed
Yep.
because they're cool with it.
Yeah.
So when I do my vocal ticks and I kind of do the expressions, the urges and the stress relief, um, or the suspense for the stress relief,
Hmm.
isn't quite there as much.
Yeah.
And because before, when I was completely closeted, and I would have to excuse myself or whatever. Maybe it was when I got into the car at the end of the day when it was just
Hmm.
ticks left and right, just
Right.
exploding, and um, and I still do that, on occasion, depending on
Hmm.
what traffic
Yeah.
is like, depending on
Yeah.
my stress
Same
levels.
here.
But and it's a nice place to, you have your own pod and you can just kind of tick, without consequence at all if it doesn't
Right.
interfere with your driving. Um, but yeah, since uh, coming out about it, it's really made my ticks easier to manage and way
Good.
less of a problem for me.
And I love that you say that because that's kind of one of the biggest things I preach is trying to get to that point of being honest and vulnerable because I think honestly that's helped me so much in my whole life. I've always been so open, like even as a young kid, and I talked to my mom about it and I'm like, I don't remember like why I was ever like that. And I think she just always like accounts it to. She's like, we've never made it seem like you were doing anything weird, so we allowed you to just do it. And so I think that just fed into like, because I have a very large family and they're amazing. I have the best family, I swear, in the world. They're so big, like there's so many people, but we're all so close still. And so maybe I was just used to taking in front of a lot of people most of my life because of that. But I just, because people always ask me like how I became so open, and it's hard for me to answer because I feel like I've been like that ever since I was a child, and it comes with practice. It's not always easy for me to talk about. It's not always easy for me to show my tics as much as it might seem like it is. But it's just like talking to like one person, like starting there. And I always tell that to people because like you said, it's so much more relieving. Like I take at work, I have a tic where I hit my mouse a lot. And then sometimes I have to hit it against my keyboard.
Yeah.
To me, I'm like, this is the loudest sound in the world right now. And everybody around me, they're like, I don't even hear it anymore. Like I'm so used to it. Like it doesn't bother me.
Yeah.
I sit right next to, like, my boss sits right next to me. And then somebody else that I started the job with sits on the other side. He's like, I've gotten used to it. And like at old jobs, people have told me like, they tell me that it's kind of like white noise to them, that when I'm not there, it's almost weird not to hear it. I'm like, well, I guess that's good.
It's so funny because I do the same thing. My ring finger, when I'm using my mouse, will do the right button click. And so what I do for a living, I do multimedia. I edit photos and things like that.
Okay, cool.
And I interfere with my own process with my ring finger because it just kind of goes off on its own and ends up clicking the mouse and doing things I didn't intend to do.
Yep.
When I had one of my psychiatric evaluations, they give, and some people might recognize this. It's a computer test where you kind of have to hit the space bar at like certain times to see how your brain responds to things. And I botched that test so badly because this ring finger was just like, hitting the space bar every opportunity it had.
Yeah. Well, even as you said that, I almost feel like it felt triggering to me because I do that sometimes on the keyboard. Like I have to click over and over and over again. And then all of a sudden I hit like 18 S's and that's not what I wanted to write at all. And I have to start all over.
Yeah, we're actually going to bail out on this interview early. But I maybe that's the risk that people are talking about, where they don't want to get in a situation where, the tics influence them or exacerbate because they're around other Touretters. But, and I'm kind of mildly joking about that, but it's kind of funny how TS can kind of get in the way of other, I was at, the doctor I go to for my asthma, and they give you that test where you have to like, give like a heaving breath into this tube to kind of see what your breath power is or whatever.
Yeah, I know.
And I was messing that up.
Yeah.
Like I was messing that up with the stethoscope stuff where they, like, okay, now breathe, and then the breathing tics come in. And
yes, I just had that recently because I was really sick a couple weeks ago, and they were telling me to take deep breaths, and I'm like, all right, don't tic right now, because I start to do it, and then there's like short breaths, and they're like, nice deep breaths. I'm like, I'm trying. One thing I definitely want to make sure I ask you about before we like start to wrap up or anything, what made you, and I know we've touched base on it and we talked about it, I think even when we did our interview for your podcast when I was on it, what made you want to start it? Was it just like a one day it like came to you like, I need to do this? Or like, was it something you thought about for a really long time? Because I know with my videos, I went to make a video probably 100 times for probably a year. And the first one that I actually made, I sat hovering my mouse over that publish button for so long before I did it.
Yeah. I guess what did it, and it had been on my mind for a while, maybe a couple of years, but I had always assumed that a podcast about Tourette syndrome already existed and was already probably pretty prolific, because there's a podcast about everything, about every little niche topic, from quilting to you name it. There, you can find multiple podcasts.
I listen to them all day long at work, so I know exactly. I'm subscribed to all kinds.
Yeah, I'm a podcast junkie, and I listen to so many of them. But when it finally came down to it, I didn't see any substantial podcast, or really any podcast. Actually, I don't want to dishonor anybody who did one in the past that I missed, and that's possible. But at the time, I just didn't see one. Right. So I was like, okay, well, I mean, this is sort of my background. This is what I do for a living with multimedia. So I can it's already turnkey if I want to do it.
Right.
I just have to figure out a way to talk about it. And the impetus was, was that, I was, I think 37 at the time. And I had already been thinking for years about, because like if you have TS and you're not open about it, it's on your mind all the time.
Yeah.
On, how you're going to avoid this. Like, oh, the boss is coming and he's got somebody important with him. And
right.
I have this urge right now. And what do I do about this? And it's on your mind all the time, the awkwardness of having TS. And I think I was just giving myself headaches over it.
Yeah.
And also I had sort of, I guess, gotten to a place in my career where I felt somewhat comfortable and established. So I was like, what's the worst that could happen if I open up and just start talking to other people and try to do this in a way where it's not like a sensationalist documentary about Tourette syndrome from the outside. It's more, I want to talk to other people. The only thing I knew about TS is what I've heard at the conferences when I was a kid that my mom took me to, and then my own experiences and whatever else I've seen on TV, and the fact that people make fun of it. Those were the things I knew about Tourette syndrome. And you were actually one of the first people I found on Twitter who was open about it and had a sense of pride in it. I was like, okay, so I'm writing her name down. I'm going to reach out to her. and just seeing that, but like you were a huge inspiration for the podcast, just seeing that people being open and honest about it and telling their own stories and not having shame about it and using it as something that can be a magnet for other people to tell their story.
Yeah. That
really helped me to kind of get there and be like, okay, maybe this is something I could really actually do. But I didn't think it would go that far. I think my initial thinking was I would get you and maybe like 4 other people and nobody else would want to talk to me because I'm a total stranger and no one has a reason to trust me or anything.
Yeah.
And, they could just take me at my word that I have Tourette syndrome and here are my plans. So I did a series of interviews, and actually when I put the word out that this is what I'm going to be doing, it was like a freight train of people lining up and saying like, I'd love to do an interview. I have a really unique background, or, and it panned out every single time. I ended up putting together kind of like a preview sort of thing with clips from certain interviews I had done.
Yeah.
Just to kind of put it out there as a teaser of like, here's the vibe of this show. We're talking about ourselves and learning about ourselves by talking about each other or to each other. And just what I got from the very first one I did was with Maddie, in season 1, episode 1. Season 1, episode 0 was my backstory, and I kind of get that out of the way. Season 1, episode 1 was Maddie, and we had so many things in common that I had never imagined. And it got me thinking about all these other things that might be TS related. And it's like, oh my God, you do that too. I've never talked to anybody else who's even described it that way, that sort of thing. She had the ear popping tic, I think we thought we were the only people in the world who had it because it's so bizarre. And, but it wasn't the case. And we found, and then all of a sudden people start chiming in like, hey, I got the ear popping tic too. I heard you talking about this. I've never heard anybody talk about it. And so the momentum of it just really kind of, it just kind of, the show made itself, I guess. Yeah. Because the conversations were so easy to have. There's no special editing or anything like that. It's just, developing the comfort level by kind of getting fed up with myself of being, why am I so closeted about this? Yeah. And what's the worst that could happen if I can start talking about it? If I can't imagine any of my friends being weird about it. If my coworkers are weird about it, then okay, maybe I can explain a little bit further and then they'll probably get it. But I didn't have any bad experiences after that. I didn't bring it up to anybody who wasn't just completely like, oh, well, I had no idea. Like, tell me more about that. Yeah. But in a sincerely curious, the questions were well worded. Sometimes you could tell they're maybe a little bit nervous about asking certain things, but if you kind of put it out to them, like, look, I'm not going to be embarrassed about this. I was embarrassed, but now like my interest is in talking about this, so I can kind of get through this whole thing, and we can get through this together because you're better informed about it. Right. And when that all started to kind of crystallize, I was like, okay, the podcast has to continue. It'll have a season 2 where it'll do it as long as I possibly can. Yeah. And so season 5 is coming up, and hopefully starting by the end of March, maybe early April. But,
cool. Yeah. Your podcast, it's obviously, I think it's incredible. I'm subscribed to it clearly. I listen to it. So, and all the stories that you share, they're just so like, there's just so many of us that are so similar and so different all at the same time. And I think that's why it's
Yeah.
so important and so awesome that you do it. Because again, like you're sharing so many other stories. And I think that's kind of like, I feel like I fed off of inspiration from that as well for me to start doing videos like this. Like I want
Hmm.
to show people, like people ask me like what this like with Tourette's or what do you do when you do this? And I think it's important because like I might not do the thing that they're asking about. So I want to talk to somebody that might do
Yeah.
it. Or like even like you said, that ear popping tick, I guarantee like other people that do it were concerned about what they were doing to their ears too. And like
Yeah.
hearing you say like that somebody told you that it's actually something that they do, like that could relieve so much stress from them at the same time. Because I get concerned
Yeah, for
about hurting
sure.
myself all the time. I have like when you kind of said the muscle tension, I have this really weird tick where I have to like press my foot into the ground, but like sideways. Like I'm on the side of my foot. And I have
Huh,
to
okay.
do it until I feel like the tension build up enough. And I'm constantly scared like I'm gonna go too hard one day and like snap my ankle.
Oh, man, you're making me want to do it now. Like,
Sorry, I hope you don't get that one because it's my least favorite.
um, but no, yeah, exactly what you were saying about the sort of openness level, um, and because it does truly affect all walks of life,
Yeah.
and it's been a big goal of the podcast to be as diverse as possible.
Mhm.
Um, I'm still trying to do better about that.
Yeah.
Get people in countries where there's really not much exposure at all,
Yeah.
or parts of the world. So far, it's listened to, according to the analytics, by every populated continent right now,
That's
which is
crazy. That's
great.
awesome.
Um, but it really does. It's not a thing that I think. I think there's and I think this has been the presentation of it in the past. I think a lot of people think that it's just something that affects like white guys or white boys or
Mhm.
something.
Your children and
And
not adults.
right, and I think statistically, according to the science and the researchers I've talked to, it does affect males more than females, but
Yeah, that's what I've
or
read
boys
too.
more than girls. But it doesn't dominate any certain race or any other kind of
Yeah.
it's the brain,
Mhm.
um and it's also super undiagnosed,
Yes.
I would say too, because of the sort of shame and embarrassments, and people feel there may be cultures where being open about your flaws as such may not be the thing to do, and
Right.
so so there may be a hesitancy to go out and kind of explore that part of yourself that may
Right.
be viewed as a weakness,
Yeah.
versus something that if you explore it, you will find there are advantages to it,
Yeah.
as well, to having TS. Uh, the, the the one I always go to is that procedural memory piece. That TS is the only, as far as I know, it's the only disorder that's ever shown um, enhanced procedural memory, like uh, things where your brain just kind of like gets the hang of it, of a
Okay.
process or a task quickly,
Yeah.
which could explain the music angle. Why there seem to be a number of music prodigies with TS,
Yeah.
creative prodigies, uh, people who have their interest
Mhm.
seem to be able to kind of get it quicker.
Yeah.
And and this is not to say like TS is better than this other disorder or anything like
Right.
that.
No, of
I mean,
course not.
that's
Yeah.
never what I'm saying. But just saying that if you explore it and kind of get to know it and get a sense of command over it, in your own context in your own life, then you can really do some amazing things. And
Yeah.
that's what I'm trying to kind of tell parents who are
Yep.
worried about the prognosis with their kids who were just
Mhm.
diagnosed. And people have asked me about the life expectancy, and I'm like, just no, 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 no.
Yeah. Like
It's
wrong
this
road
is
to go down with it.
Yeah, yeah. It's like this is. I don't see this as a bad thing.
Yeah.
I fully admit that I used to see it as a weakness that I didn't
Mhm.
want to show because I was worried I wouldn't get a job or a girlfriend or
Right.
whatever. Um, but it's it's a great thing
Yeah.
to me in my life. Like TS is a great thing, and talking with people like you and other people from the community has really enriched my life in the past few years in a way that I never thought possible.
Yeah, and I 100% agree. Obviously, I have a very positive outlook, and I always try to tell people, like, that's not to say, like, this is how I think about it every day. On those days where I can't stop, like, I hate every single part of it, like, and I just
Yeah,
think, like, why can't I just, like, let this go? But it's brought so much into my life. It's made me, I mean, I think I'd be a completely different person if I didn't have Tourette syndrome. I don't think
yeah,
I'd be accomplishing some of the things I am.
For sure.
And that's really honestly because of me, of who I am. Maybe it's my competitive nature, but I don't like when somebody tells me I can't do something.
Right.
Because I'm just
Yeah.
gonna say, well, you watch me. Like, I promise you I will.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the cool thing about all of this, just the exposure of the
Yeah.
potential and really just relaxing the population about the whole thing. I mean, that's
Yeah.
the biggest goal for me is A, for people who have TS, that they can self-accept, and if you have painful tics and things like that, like, do what you got to do
Right.
to manage the things in your life that cause you pain. But otherwise, I've accepted my tics and I see them as companions now.
Mhm.
Shout out to Alyssa C. Water for putting that word in my head of
Yeah.
seeing my tics as something that just kind of orbit me and come with me, and they
Yeah.
pop out at certain times and it may be inconvenient, but those are my companions. And
Mhm.
everybody's got things like that in their life where they have these involuntary factors. And that's kind of a relation point, I think, for me. And then too, the rest of the world kind of, I guess, gets a better understanding by hearing these conversations.
Yep.
Parents get a better understanding by hearing these conversations. They feel better about their kids' future.
Yep.
And everybody just kind of relaxes and chills out about it.
Mhm.
And so it's not just it's not such a under the microscope curiosity. It's just another thing that exists out there in the world. And there are bigger things for us to put our focus on.
Right.
And better things, like getting along with each other, giving each other room to breathe, being
Mhm.
more empathetic,
Right.
and just relaxing.
Mhm.
And that's that helps Touretters, and that helps everybody out. It helps the
Yeah.
messaging out.
Right. 100%. And that's what I've had people, like friends throughout school and stuff. Those were the main people that would come, and they would tell me, like, I was at this place the other day. I was like, and I think I saw somebody that had Tourette syndrome. So, and I like that, like, that's more where their brain would go rather than be like, why is this person being like weird? Like, why are
Yeah.
they doing that? The more
Right.
people we talk to, the more people that hear stories like yours, mine, and everybody else's, like, the more that's where their brain could go, like in public. Like, oh, well, that person might
Right.
have this, like, whatever, let's move on. And that's what I want. I want everybody to be able to just go to the store. Like, I know people that have a hard time just going to the grocery store, and I don't want that to be a thing anymore. And that's one of my biggest goals. Like, obviously not people going grocery shopping, but people being able to just not have to worry about the public harassing them in public, I guess.
Yeah. No one can tell you your life in a way that if you disagree with it, just know who you are,
Right.
and know what works for you, know what helps you be a good person,
Right.
and get to the goals that you want to achieve. I mean, these are the more important things for me. And talking about TS has been the thing that's really helped me to be comfortable with focusing on that versus hiding the things about myself that I didn't
Right.
like. And that opens up all kinds of other doors with being candid, being honest, and all of that. So yeah, that's the goal for me.
Yeah. Well, good. I think that's like a really good note to like end on. I think that's a really powerful statement that you had. Before I end it though, I want to make sure I give another shout out to your podcast. It's Tourette Podcast, and people can find that on all the podcast streaming devices, right?
That's right. Yeah, it's iTunes, TourettePodcast.com, TourettePodcast.libsyn.com.
Okay.
So add the S onto it. It's sort of, if you're looking at it, it's Tourette_S podcast.
Okay.
But it's on all the podcast apps. If you have any Spotify, if you have any trouble finding it, you can email me at TourettePodcast@gmail.com.
Okay.
And I'll direct you to where you can find it. And yeah, I appreciate you kind of letting me, and also influencing me to get the message out there in this way, because you were extremely early on for me in finding people who were confident talking about it. So I appreciate that. It's a lot of fun. And again, if anybody has any questions or suggestions for the podcast, things that they want to hear that they're not hearing, if you've listened to all 4 seasons so far and you're like, wait a minute, I haven't heard this thing addressed yet. Again, get up with me, because I want it to be, as comprehensive as it can possibly be. Yeah. Talking with as many different kinds of people as I can possibly talk to. So yeah, TourettePodcast@gmail.com, or you can get up with me through the website, which is TourettePodcast.com.
Okay. And they can find, like, all social media platforms is Tourette Podcast as well, right? Like Instagram, Twitter, everything, I believe is, right? Because I know I'm pretty sure I follow you on all of them.
At Tourette's Pod on Twitter.
That pod. Okay.
They had a character limit, so I couldn't do the
Okay.
podcast.
Yeah, I gotcha.
At Tourette's Pod on Twitter, and but everything else, just look up Tourette's Podcast and it'll come up.
Okay, perfect. So, well, that was great. Thank you so much again. I loved being able to talk to you and chat with you more and learn more about you. I can't thank you enough. I appreciate it so much. Like it was nice having a conversation with somebody that gets it.
Yeah, for sure.